Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. Yesterday, some news came out that shocked a lot of fight fans. Darren Till has been cut from the UFC. Whether you want to say he was released, whether you want to say he was cut, inevitably it means the same thing. Darren Till is no longer on the UFC roster. I'm going to give my reaction to that news. We're going to look at Darren Till's overall UFC resume. We're going to look at some tweets that Darren Till put out that may have hinted at his future in combat sports. And I'm going to give my thoughts on what's next for Darren Till. Could we see him in Bellator? Could we see him in PFL? Could we see him in BKFC next? I'm going to give my thoughts at the end of this video on where I think Darren Till inevitably ends up next. So now my reaction to this news, and maybe this is a bit of a hot take, you'll have to let me know down in the comments. When I saw the news that Darren Till was cut from the UFC, this initially came out from UFC Roster Watch on Twitter that tweets out automatically when a UFC fighter is removed from the roster. Sometimes this cannot be accurate because sometimes fighters are just ineligible to be ranked and they might have left USADA because of an injury or some sort. So I wanted to wait. That's why I didn't make this video yesterday. But once I realized that this news was official via Darren Till's tweets, which we'll look at later in the video, honestly, I don't care. I don't care. You could make an argument because Darren Till came out basically and said he asked for his release. But you could make an argument Darren Till deserved to be cut at this point. He's lost 5 out of his last 6 fights. The last fight that he won was all the way back in November of 2019 at UFC 244. I was actually there live for that event. That is the last fight he's won. In the last 2 fights, he's been stopped in those fights, and he hasn't looked particularly good. So honestly, I don't care. The UFC barrier of entry is getting lower and lower and lower, and I understand that Darren Till's not a bottom-of-the-barrel fighter, but I'm not in favor of keeping fighters just because they have a unique personality. Because a lot of people like Darren Till and were shocked that he was cut because, oh, Darren Till has a unique personality. But in my eyes, Darren Till will never be a middleweight contender again. Maybe if he went back down to welterweight, maybe we could talk about it there. I doubt it there as well, considering his wrestling, considering the wrestling pedigree of the welterweight division. He's never going to challenge for a belt. You know, that's never happening, regardless of what Darren Till says, what Michael Bisping and his UK bias says. Darren Till was done, okay? I know he's 30 years old. He could have a career resurgence. In my mind, he was done. So what do I want to watch him get beat up for in main events of fight nights? Is that what we're going to do now? We're going to use his name value and watch him get beat up by contenders? I don't want to see that. So I don't care that he's gone. Honestly, he deserved to be cut, in my opinion, even if he didn't ask for his release. And I want to talk about something that I've talked about many times on the channel. I even made a video about it, I think, like a year and a half ago. I believe Darren Till has been overrated his entire UFC career. You go back, he made his UFC debut back in May of 2015. And, you know, he beat up some guys who are basically no-names. The first notable name on his resume is Donald Cowboy Cerrone back in October of 2017. He finished Cowboy Cerrone in the first round. And now, while I'm not going to say Donald Cerrone, he was not a dead body at this point in time. He was on the decline. And also, Cowboy Cerrone really didn't belong at welterweight. And also, Darren Till was a massive welterweight. So this really looked like a lightweight fighting a middleweight. So I'm not that impressed. And you can make the argument that this is Darren Till's best UFC win. He is 6-5-1 in his UFC career. The fight after that, he beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Oh, that sounds like a great win until you put context on it. Most people believe that Wonderboy Thompson won this fight, and this was arguably a robbery. Most people agreed that Wonderboy Thompson should have gotten the decision. So I don't want to sit here and say, oh, this is a great win for Darren Till when he arguably lost the fight. Then he gets a title shot against Tyron Woodley, and he loses in the second round. He gets dropped. He basically gets dominated in the fight, eventually gets choked in the second round, taps out, he's done. After that, he gets Jorge Masvidal, who Jorge Masvidal at this point in time had like a 2-year layoff. They were kind of giving Darren Till, they thought it was going to be an easy win for Darren Till. He goes out there, he gets brutally KO'd by Jorge Masvidal. He decides to move up to middleweight. They give him Kelvin Gastelum. And one thing I will say for Darren Till, he has taken tough fights. Even if he ends up losing them, he has taken tough fights. He goes against Kelvin Gastelum. This is his last win in the UFC back in 2019 at UFC 244. He wins this fight split decision. This was a relatively uneventful fight. It could have went either way. I'm not all that impressed by it. It is decent to have a win over Kelvin Gastelum, But again, it's a razor close split decision, and it wasn't super eventful. After that, and you can make an argument that this is Darren Till's best performance, was against Robert Whittaker in July of 2020. Robert Whittaker, clearly one of the best middleweights in the world, and Darren Till had a decent performance against him, but clearly lost the decision. And then after that, he gets finished by Derek Brunson. He gets submitted in the third round. Had some moments in this fight, but he inevitably gets finished by Derek Brunson. After that, and most recently at UFC 282, December 2022, he gets finished by Dricus du Plessis, and he gets finished in the third round, taps immediately. He had some moments in that second round. Arguably got close to even finishing Dricus. But in the third round, he just flops to the ground like a dead fish and then gets tapped out via face crank, taps immediately. And in my opinion, in that Dricus du Plessis fight, in that Derek Brunson fight, Darren Till looked horrendous. The takedown defense looked horrendous. And in the du Plessis fight, in the first round, he just hung out against the cage getting smashed. He spent more time and energy giving the ref the thumbs up than trying to get out of the position. He almost got stopped in the first round. I thought he looked horrible at UFC 282, and you can go back and watch my post-fight. I said, I never want to see Darren Till fight again. And I think what we have here in Darren Till is we have a unique personality, so therefore a lot of fans kind of cling to a unique personality. We have a unique personality that the UFC kind of wants to push, and then on top of that, he's from the UK. So of course the UFC is going to want to build him into their UK superstar. Ultimately, that really never came to fruition. And just because people in the UK care about him as a fighter, that isn't a reason to just keep him on the roster, even though he's literal dead weight. And then you have the fact that every time he loses, he's always like, oh, I got 4 ACL tears. I got a PCL tear. I got this. I got that. Every time he loses, it's nothing but excuses. And yeah, I'm still going to be world champion one day. No, you're not. It's just excuses. I don't even know at this point if Darren Till was even preparing. Honestly, in the Derek Brunson fight, Derek Brunson has horrible cardio himself, and Darren Till was gassed in that fight. And he has not worked on his ground game in I don't know how many years it seems like, because he gets taken down and he's basically useless off his back. So I think you look at Darren Till's resume, and I understand he has that split decision win over Kelvin Gastelum. I understand he has the decision win over Wonderboy Thompson. His best win is against a declining Cowboy Cerrone. And the only reason people hyped him up is because he was from the UK and had that unique personality. So, to be fair, I don't care that Darren Till's gone. Okay? Was he a mildly exciting fighter? Yeah. Did he have some decent striking? Yeah. But he wasn't overall a well-rounded mixed martial artist. So he did not belong in the UFC. He was just taking up space. And the fact that he was ranked, I think, is an embarrassment. And I think a lot of people consistently were elevating him off of losses. You look at even I just did it in this video. You look at the fight against Robert Whittaker. Oh, well, he did good. He did good against Robert Whittaker, even though he lost. Oh, in the Derek Brunson fight, he had some bright spots, but he lost and got finished. Oh, in the Dricus du Plessis fight. Oh, well, he lost and he looked terrible when he got finished, but he had some moments in that second round. People were constantly elevating Darren Till off losses, and I think that was to his own detriment. Because at some point, I think he needed to step back in competition. I even picked him to beat Dricus du Plessis because I thought du Plessis wasn't that great. But Darren Till ultimately couldn't get any wins. He's lost 5 out of his last 6. And I think it was time for the UFC to part ways with him, even if he didn't request his release. So you look at the tweets that Darren Till put out, because we were wondering, was he actually, off the UFC roster, or was this some kind of mistake? Darren Till put out a tweet. What's happening, everyone? Me, Dana, Hunter are still cool as fuck. I asked UFC to remove me to sort some other shit for the foreseeable. They happily agreed to release me out of the contract, which I appreciate. I'm not going anywhere, got big plans to execute, and I'll be back. So what does that exactly mean? Basically saying, I asked the UFC for my release, and they gave me my release. And I appreciate that. Well, the UFC gave him his release because they saw exactly what I just told you. He's not a future contender. He's not a future title challenger. And he's looked worse than ever. And I know Dana White at UFC 282, he said, oh, I don't see how Darren Till's stock goes down. I mean, I think his stock was at the lowest point after UFC 282. He looked horrendous against Dricus du Plessis. Horrendous. The takedown defense looked terrible. The overall just defense in general, the fact that he was willing to hang up against the cage. The feet were super close together. He was getting taken down with ease. Go watch the last takedown that du Plessis got on him before the finish. Say no more. It was the worst attempt to even try to stuff a takedown that I've ever seen in my entire life. There was a lack of effort from Darren Till. Then, also Darren Till puts in here, they happily agreed to release me. They're not happily agreeing to just release fighters who are on winning streaks, who have a foreseeable future. No, they released him because they know he has no future. And he says, I'm not going anywhere. What exactly does that mean? Because he's definitely going somewhere. And we're going to look at the second tweet. That's kind of just really emojis, but you'll get the point in a second. I got big plans. I'm going to execute them, and I'll be back. Let's take a look at the second tweet. The second tweet, he just tweets some emojis of boxing gloves and then money signs. And I think this is him hinting at what is he going to do now. And I think if you combine those two tweets together, what Darren Till is saying, look, I'm going to go try to make some money doing some type of boxing, whether it be, YouTube boxing. Maybe he's going to try to get a YouTube boxing fight. I could see that happening. Maybe just watch what happened this past weekend. I'm not even going to mention their names, but you all know who I'm talking about, the YouTube boxer. Maybe Darren Till is saying, look, oh wait, I'm a UFC veteran. I've lost 5 out of my last 6. I've been finished in many of them. Oh, this is perfect. The YouTube boxer's probably going to pay me to box him. I think that's what he's thinking. But I don't know if that's ultimately going to happen. But what he's thinking is he's going to go do that, make some good money, and then come back to the UFC. But ultimately, I think Darren Till will never return to the UFC. Even if he goes back and YouTube box and does all this stuff and makes money, I honestly don't think the UFC is going to want him back. There is a chance he could return, but I don't think it happens. And ultimately, I don't even think he gets a boxing match against a YouTuber. I think what's going to end up happening with Darren Till is I think most likely he's going to end up at BKFC. We saw just today, Luke Rockhold has signed with BKFC to take on Mike Perry. We also saw that we are getting Eddie Alvarez in BKFC. He's taking on Chad Mendes. What do all 4 of those fighters have in common? You guessed it, they're all 4 UFC veterans. So obviously BKFC is paying something. They're paying good at least, and also, even if they're paying the same, maybe they have the ability to get sponsors. So I really think that Darren Till never returns to the UFC. I think he probably goes to BKFC, but I do think there's also a chance that PFL might want him or Bellator might want him. Because even though Darren Till has, looked terrible in his last few fights, he's still a promotable fighter. He's still 30 years old. But ultimately, I don't think he has the determination. I don't think he has the grit to go out and train in and day out. He clinged on to Khamzat Chimaev for a while, and people were like, Khamzat Chimaev is going to save Darren Till's career. That's not how it works. Okay, that's not how it works. And I think Darren Till is just going to jump around, maybe go box at BKFC for a while, make some money there, maybe try YouTube boxing if he gets knocked out at BKFC, and maybe before all that, maybe Bellator might want him, maybe PFL might want him. But my official prediction for where he goes, I think next we will see Darren Till in BKFC. I just think it makes the most sense. And what's currently going on in the landscape of BKFC, I think Darren Till will fit in perfectly. Because Darren Till, again, I just sat here and talked about his skill set. His wrestling and takedown defense is his issue. So why does he want to go sign with Bellator and still have to fight in MMA? So, even PFL still has to fight in MMA. I think he's going to want to box. He has very good striking. So I think he ends up going to BKFC, collecting a check there, and I don't think we will ever see Darren Till in the UFC again. And if we do, he's going to lose. At this point, and I know a lot of people are hyping this guy up too, I think Bo Nickel would defeat Darren Till. Bo Nickel has 3 pro MMA fights. That's how bad Darren Till's takedown defense is. So I don't care that Darren Till's gone. I don't think he belonged in the UFC anymore, honestly. And I think he ends up with BKFC. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Where do you think Darren Till is going to end up next? Are you sad that he's no longer with the UFC? Because if you're a fan of Darren Till, you should be happy because none of the ranked guys, he's not beating any of these ranked guys. So you should be happy not to have to watch Darren Till lose anymore. He can go somewhere where maybe he can get some wins. But let me know what you guys think about all that down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.